Over the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity to edit a couple of Netflix shows like The Abandons, Griselda, and Narcos Mexico. And while I'd love to show you exactly how I cut scenes from those series, I'm pretty sure Netflix would probably have something to say about that. So here's what we're gonna do instead. I'm gonna use a short film I cut called Trust No One and walk you through my exact process from start to finish. And stick around until the end, you'll see the finished scene exactly as I delivered it. Let's get into it. So I have the latest version of Avid Media Composer open. And before I get started, all I wanna say is that, I don't typically read the scene, from the script before I start cutting it. Because I've read the script at this point at least 3 times, twice before the interview and then again at least once after I've gotten the gig. The reason I don't read the scene prior to cutting it is because I don't want it to influence the way I cut the scene. I want to see how I react to the footage that was shot, the performances, and so I just come at it kind of with a fresh take. And what I will do though is that after I cut the scene, I will go back then to the script, read the scene, and to more than anything to make sure that I did not miss any lines of dialogue and just again make sure that everything is in there. I typically organize my scene bins kind of fairly the standard way. The one thing I do ask my assistant to do is to take all the clips, the takes, setups, and throw them into a timeline. So we have a string out of everything that was shot for that scene. And I'll just go from the very beginning and I'll just literally watch it as if I was watching a TV show. And so I'm looking for, well, first of all, I want to understand the footage, what we actually have to work with. But of course, I'm looking for, any specific moments that stand out, performances, looks, the way lines are delivered. I mean, so many things, right? So I typically don't write notes as I'm watching this, right? To make, say, selects or to pick out, say, moments that I want to use. More than anything, I make mental notes, right? If anything, it really does stand out, what I'll do is I'll just typically let's say I like Ben's performance here, right? The male actor. If I like it, I'll just bring it up, say, to V2 here, That lets me know that, I like this moment. What I will do as well is if I'm playing, as I'm playing it, if something stands out, I'll throw in a marker there. Now, I might just say, leave the markers as is, I know that it's something I have to look for, or I'll just, go in there in the marker and type out, what I liked about it. Nice look. Or, good line. So at this point, I'm just, again, getting a feel for the scene, for what was shot. And in my head, I'm really kind of building out, I'm editing the scene in my head pretty much, right? Making a lot of mental notes for the most part. So, what am I looking for in a take? I really focus a lot on the eyes of the actors, the delivery. Obviously, did they deliver a line cleanly with a certain emphasis on a certain word? Is the rhythm right, say, of how they deliver a line? Is the movement, not only them, but also the camera, all these things, right? It's almost like if you're driving, for example, or you're on the road and you're looking straight ahead, but you're so aware of all these things happening around you. You're conscious of what's happening, even though you're just kind of looking straight, right? That's what I compare it to, because as I'm watching this footage or these clips or the string out, I'm taking into consideration so many things, all the stuff that I listed. And I'm also maybe thinking about music, and we'll get to that in a bit, and sound effects, and I mean, so many things, but I'm not just stuck and focus on trying to figure everything out at the same time. It's just I'm still moving forward, but in my mind, I am already kind of getting ahead of myself, right? Of thinking of how I'm going to craft this story and getting ideas. So let's talk about one of the things that I get asked about a lot is where do I start, say, cutting a scene? You have an empty timeline, and it's all right, where do you start? Well, for me personally, honestly, it's one of 3 ways. I can either take it from the beginning of the scene, or I can say start at the end and work my way back. Or I think this is like my favorite method is starting somewhere in the middle, but picking like an anchor shot. And what I mean by an anchor shot, for me, what it means is like, okay, like a moment that just stands out, whether it be, a camera move, a line that was delivered, a certain action by the actor, something that just kind of gets me moving, right? Because sometimes what can happen is like, maybe you're not feeling it, or just, you really are, say, puzzled, right? It's like, so where to literally start it, because you can't figure it out, what's your kind of endpoint to a scene. And so I find that kind of jolt, right? Something that just grabs me, takes me in. So let's look at this scene real quick though. So, just get an idea of, how I got started with this scene. When I saw this setup here, I knew that this is the beginning of the film, right? And so we're still getting to know these characters. We want to create some mystery. We don't want to come in, for example, right away and just see who they are, right? In this case, I knew that I wanted to start off in these French overs to create that mystery. We don't know who they are, right? It's a little bit, you see a lot of shadow on their faces. You don't see their eyes clearly. And so I, in this case, started there. The thing was then, though, at what point do we then, go from that French over and just go to a typical kind of over shoulder shot and we see them clearly? Basically, that's like our real introduction into, their world and getting to know them. So that was then really the decision point was like, when do we make that switch? So go from the back of the car to then going in the front of the car with them. Well, how did I pick that moment then? Well, it's the same way that I described how I start a scene, getting that kind of jolt of energy, right? Something that just kind of pulls me in or that kind of wakes me up. And in this case, it was with this line.
Why? Explain to me how doing things your way's worked out so far on this.
If you want to keep this process with you every time you edit, I put together a free checklist that covers everything that we worked on today, every single step in order you can keep at your desk. The link is in the description. Make sure to grab it today and use it next time you're cutting a scene. And also let me know how it goes in the comments below. So I'll build the scene and I will get it to a point where I can then pass it off now to my assistant editor to do temp sound effects. So I'll just cut the scene with just production sound, and then my assistant editor will add temp sound effects. And I say temp because all the sound effects are going to be replaced eventually by the sound team. But for now, as we're working, say, on an episode, we have to throw in sound effects and music to present it to directors and producers, and also to have it as a reference and for the sound team. Now let's talk about music. I do not like to cut scenes with music. I want to cut a scene dry with no music because I want to really get the story down, right? I want to make sure the performances are working, that I'm feeling the emotion without having, say, a song be like a cheat, right? Or a song telling us what to feel. I want to make sure that the emotion comes through from just the performances and I'm nailing that. And then eventually when I do add music, that's just going to elevate then the scene. I also don't want to necessarily get influenced with the rhythm and pacing from a song or a cue. I want that to be dictated more so by the cadence of the dialogue, how it's being delivered, the performances from the actors, the energy, from their movements. Now, that's not to say that I'm not thinking about music. And in fact, as I'm editing a scene and I realize, does this need music? And if it does, I will either say, write a note, on a notepad, or I'll, put a marker, say, on the moment, say, where I want the music to start. And then maybe write a description, say, like, music starts here. Or I will even add, say, what kind of music I'm thinking. Is it percussive? Is it a drone? Some type of description, so that when I then do a music pass, I'll kind of know what was inspiring me at that moment, and then what I should be looking for or listening to. So when do I know that a scene is done for the moment, right? And that I can just then move on to the next one? Well, you know, after I cut every scene, I watch it back. And I want to make sure that it doesn't bump me, right? That something doesn't take me out of the story. I want to make sure that it's playing smoothly, that the lines are hitting, that the performances are landing, that it's just working well. Because I understand that, I'm gonna keep working on this scene eventually, right? I'm gonna go back to it. And so it's not that it's over, I'm done with it. No, I'm gonna keep working on it eventually, but for now, I just wanna make sure at least the goal is so that it doesn't bump me, that it takes me out of the story, that I make sure obviously that I have all the lines are in there, all the moments I'm hitting, and then I gotta move on to the next one. A lot of what I've learned has been from me being in rooms with other editors. When I was an assistant, my editors would bring me into the rooms and I would watch them cut. I would watch them, say, work with directors and producers. And I learned so much. But eventually, as I started editing and became a full-time editor, I started developing my own process, what works for me. So I took, bits of pieces from other editors, how they like to work, and then kind of build my own way of working, right? And so use this as inspiration, get ideas, but understand that you're gonna have to find your own way of working, your own process, what works for you. All right, as promised, here is the full scene we worked on from the short film, Trust No One.
I just can't commit to these odds. The probabilities of us going in
Let's
like...
just get this done. Did you lock the trunk?
Yeah. But I still think we should be armed.
I told you they'd frisk us. I would.
3 floors, at least 65 apartments, 3 accessible exits on a 3rd floor.
Stop.
Why? Explain to me how doing things your way's worked out so far on this. All right? Let me just figure out how the fuck we're gonna get out of this.
You brought it with you?
They'll know where we are by now. They'll know everything.
That was the only bargaining chip you had.
I'm dead with or without this. You know that.
Let's get this done. Ben.
I just can't.
Okay, so let's go. Ben, I will keep running with you, I will. But we are running out of ways that I can help us. And half the guys I thought could help are on Laszlo's side now. And he's on your ass, which means he's not far behind mine. We have to get rid of that fucking thing now. Look, I've got no clue what's gonna go down. I don't. But this is the only option we have left. So either we're in this together or not at all.
I sense something's off, we leave. No arguing.
Arguing for me.
Hope you enjoyed that, and if you want to see how I cut an action-packed fight scene, make sure to check out the next video.